I'm Ethan Walker. I'm 27. I own a paid-off Silverado, a modest two-bedroom near downtown Columbus, and a 1987 Camaro. I've been restoring piece by piece with my own two hands. I don't drink much. I pay my bills on time. I plan ahead. And this Christmas, I was going to propose. The ring $7.500, custom cut. Oval solitaire was tucked in the back of my sock drawer. I'd been saving for a year, clipping side projects on top of my job in project management, skipping happy hours, dodging big Amazon buys, all for this moment. Christmas dinner at her parents' house. Both our families there. Dessert rolls out. I stand, take her hand, and ask her to marry me in front of the people who raised us. It was going to be perfect. And then 3 days before Christmas, Andrea texted me. I think it's best if you don't come to Christmas. Jensen's coming. It might be awkward. Just like that. I reread it 5 times. Not a call. Not even a proper excuse. Just Jensen, her ex. The one with the big city energy and the flannel shirts that probably cost more than my entire garage toolkit. The one she said was just a friend from college. I was sitting in my living room, floor covered with neatly wrapped gifts, each one tagged in Sharpie with the names of her parents, her nieces, her cousin's baby, all hand-picked, antique china for her mom, first edition firefighter history for her dad. The art set she'd wanted for months, but kept talking herself out of because it's too expensive. And now, I wasn't even coming. The room felt too quiet, too bright, like I'd accidentally stepped into someone else's holiday, where I didn't belong anymore. My fingers went numb around the scissors still in my hand. She was replacing me, with him, and not just at some random dinner, but at our Christmas. I don't think I spoke for several minutes. Just sat there, blinking at the screen. When I finally stood up, my knees cracked like old wood. I walked over to the fridge, opened it, and stared at the leftover pasta I had meal prepped for the week. Then I shut the door and laughed. It was a bitter laugh, the kind you let out when the universe kicks you square in the gut and expects you to thank it for the lesson. See? I'd always been told. If you're a good man, stable, respectful, hard-working, you'll be chosen. Maybe not first, maybe not loudest, but eventually. Turns out, that's a lie. Let me rewind for a sec. I met Andrea at a backyard BBQ my buddy Jake threw during the summer of 2021. I remember it was 93 degrees, and I'd almost skipped it because I had Camaro parts to sort through in the garage. She was wearing a green sundress, the kind that actually fit. Not like the ones women tug at all night. She had this laugh, sharp, confident, didn't care if people stared. We started talking over burgers and cornhole, and by the time the sun dipped below the fence line, I was already gone. She was an art teacher at the local elementary school, passionate about her kids, frustrated by the system. She had paint on her knuckles the first time we went out, and I remember thinking, this girl shows up to life full force. We clicked fast. Too fast, maybe. But for someone like me, someone who's been ghosted for being too serious or not spontaneous enough, Andrea felt like a rare alignment. She liked that I had furniture not from IKEA, that I didn't need a GPS to plan a weekend, that I could fix a carburetor and also remember her dog's birthday. She even liked the Camaro. Most women rolled their eyes when I talked shop, but she brought me coffee in the garage and asked what quarter panels were. She sanded rust-off fenders with me once, wearing her mom's old overalls and smiling like we were building a future. Her parents loved me too, Grace and Steve. They treated me like family by month 3. I spent Sundays at their place, helping Steve rebuild his Corvette engine and taste-testing Grace's canned tomatoes. Steve used to say, "You're one of the good ones, Ethan. Don't let her forget that." Well, she did. December started fine. I had the dinner plans locked. Booked the steakhouse she always wanted to try, the Refinery. 7 p.m. Christmas Eve. Best table by the window. I even bought the green sweater she liked on me. I mapped out the whole evening down to when we'd open presents. But Andrea started changing. At first, it was little things. She barely looked up when I showed her the antique china I'd spent 3 weekends hunting for her mom. Just said, "Oh, cool." She blamed it on work holiday performances. Stressed out kids, parents breathing down her neck. And yeah, I bought it. Teaching's hard, especially in December. But then she started talking about Jensen. Casually at first. Jensen said I should travel more. Or Jensen thinks small towns kill creativity. Then every damn conversation was about his startup, his world travel, his minimalist tattoos and pour-over opinions. She didn't even notice she'd stopped asking about my day. She was always half present, eyes on her phone, giving me vague answers when I asked what she was doing later. I should have seen it coming. But here's the thing. When you've built your life around being reliable, you don't jump ship at the first leak. You patch it. You hold the line. You stay. I stayed too long. After that text, I didn't respond. Not right away. I just got up and started packing. Not my thing. Theirs. I put every gift back into the trunk of my truck, wrapped perfectly. Tags still on, except the ring. That one stayed in the drawer. It didn't deserve to witness the drive. I drove out to my uncle's cabin up near Indian Lake. No cell service. Just enough firewood and whiskey to get through the weekend. She didn't call. Didn't ask where I went. She posted a picture on Christmas Day, her and Jensen at her parents' table. Same table where I was supposed to propose. Steve was smiling. Grace looked tired. And Andrea. She looked like someone performing joy for an audience she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. But it didn't matter. She'd made her choice. And that should have been the end. Only it wasn't. Because 4 months later, she came knocking. Sweatshirt. No makeup. Hair tied back like she'd just run through regret. "I made a mistake," she said. "You were everything. Ethan." I didn't say a word. Just stood there, with her gifts still sitting unopened on a shelf in my hallway. And the Camaro. That rusted-out beauty. It purred like a beast now. I rebuilt it over the winter. Alone. Piece by piece. That car runs better without the extra weight. Just like me. I wasn't always the guy who measured love by how many weekends he spent at antique shops trying to match china patterns. A few years back, I was the one burning out on dating apps, deleting and reinstalling them like clockwork. Swipe fatigue, false hope, endless small talk that led nowhere. Most women saw the project manager, owns house, restoring a Camaro, and either assumed I was boring or already married. Andrea was different. She didn't flinch at the words 401k or valve timing. She laughed hard, leaned in, and asked questions that made me feel like more than background noise. From the moment we met, I started doing things I hadn't done in years. Planning date nights with theme, surprising her with breakfast burritos on Wednesday, even writing notes and slipping them into her lunch bag when she had long school days. I hadn't done that since college. She wasn't just a girlfriend. She was the person I started building my future around sometimes without realizing it. And I wasn't alone in that hope. Her parents, Steve and Grace, were the kind of people that made you believe in family again. Steve was a retired firefighter who still carried himself like he was on shift. Strong handshake, spotless garage, wore his fire department union Local 14 cap like it was a badge of honor. He'd invite me over for engine talk and let me use his compressor system when I didn't have the tools. We bonded over the rebuild of his '76 Corvette. That garage, it was sacred, organized like an operating room. Every wrench in its place. We'd talk for hours while drinking Budweiser and listening to classic rock on an old speaker duct taped to the corner shelf. He told me once, after an afternoon tuning carburetor, "You've got a good head on your shoulders. Ethan, I see a lot of men try to look like they have their life together. You actually do." I never told Andrea, but that meant more to me than any job performance review I'd ever gotten. Grace, her mom, was a different kind of impressive. Garden-obsessed, fiercely kind, and alarmingly observant. She could tell when you were holding something back just by how you stirred your tea. She started calling me sweetheart before Andrea even introduced me officially as her boyfriend. Invited me over to teach me her tomato canning process. which included lectures on pH levels and irrigation cycles like she was running a research lab. She once texted me at midnight to ask if I thought sage green or driftwood gray worked better for the guest room wall. I replied immediately. Not because I cared that much about paint, but because I'd never had someone ask me for my taste in that way. Her parents didn't just like me. They made room for me. And that's the part that stung later, the part that still echoes. Because when Andrea said she didn't want me at Christmas, she didn't just cancel on me. She canceled on all the versions of me they had embraced. By October, I had my mind made up. I was going to propose. I even asked Steve to help me source a particular kind of ring setting that Grace had once admired in a magazine, just to make sure it felt familiar. I planned the proposal down to the soundtrack. Christmas Eve, fireplace glowing, her family, my family, candles, laughter, and then me. Standing up, hands slightly shaking, but voice steady, asking her to build something permanent with me. It sounds dramatic, but I'd even sketched it out. A literal flowchart in my project journal. Step 1, dinner. Step 2, dessert. Step 3, family photo cue proposal. Her mom's china would be used. The centerpiece would be pine cones dipped in gold spray paint. I did myself. I was ready. And she was somewhere else entirely. The first real shift came early December, when I showed her the 4 rare china pieces I'd hunted down for her mom's collection. I laid them out like museum artifacts on my table, proud like a kid with straight A's. Andrea barely glanced up from her phone. Oh, that's nice. Just that. No smile, no curiosity. She didn't even pick them up. I tried to laugh it off. Your mom's gonna flip when she sees these. She said this pattern was impossible to find. Remember? She said, still scrolling. She blamed the detachment on stress, parent-teacher conferences, holiday program, overwhelmed by kids on sugar highs. I believed her. Or maybe I needed to believe her. But soon it became obvious it wasn't just stress. It was distance. She was home, but she wasn't with me. And then Jensen's name started coming up. At first, like old friends do, casual references. Jensen thinks I should travel more. Jensen said I should loosen up with my classroom style. Jensen this, Jensen that. He was back in town from Chicago, apparently working for some artisanal coffee startup that sold $24 bags of ethically sourced beans and lectured people on water temperature. Andrea was drawn to him the way moths are drawn to bonfires, a little hypnotized, a little reckless. She said he challenged her creatively, that he had lived, that he had seen the world. And what was I? Ohio-born, blue-collar raised, owned a house in my 20s, bought used furniture on Craigslist and fixed my own car. Reliable, steady, apparently, also boring. I noticed her pulling away slowly, like someone easing out of a parking space, 1 inch at a time so you wouldn't feel the shift. But I felt it. She stopped texting good morning, stopped asking how my day went, started saying she was out with friends instead of naming names. By December 15th, I asked her to confirm our reservation for Christmas Eve, the one I'd made months ago. Pulled every string to secure. She paused. Maybe we should keep things flexible this year. Flexible? What do you mean? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Just not so scheduled. I feel like it's all getting a little too structured. Maybe we just let things happen organically this year. Organic. After I'd literally mapped out candle placement, I nodded. Sure, I said, but my gut screamed. She was already gone. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known at that moment, was that the last gift I'd wrap would never be opened. That the family I thought I was marrying into would go quiet like I never existed. That somewhere, at a different dinner table, someone else would be sitting in the chair meant for me. And worse, he'd know he was the replacement. What comes next isn't revenge in the way you think. It's quieter, more deliberate. But it all starts with a single choice. Walk away from someone who doesn't see you, and let them feel the absence of everything you gave. What Ethan does next shocks even the people who thought they knew him best. I didn't reply to her message. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even when Grace texted me a picture of the Christmas tree. saying they'd miss me this year. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard a dozen times, and each time I closed the app without a word. I wasn't angry, not in the loud, plate-smashing kind of way. I was still like a frozen lake underfoot, nothing visible above, but pressure building deep underneath. I spent Christmas Eve alone in the cabin. My uncle lets me use up an Indian lake. The kind of silence up there that makes you hear your own heartbeat. Fire crackling, bourbon in a chipped mug, wind whistling through the cracked window frame like a warning. No signal, no noise, just me and the thoughts I hadn't dared entertain until that night. Was I boring? Was stability really such a bad thing? Why did people treat dependable men like placeholders instead of partners? And maybe the ugliest question of all, was I just a convenient background character in someone else's life? The bourbon didn't offer answers. It just burned down hard and made my chest feel something again. That night, I took the ring box out of my coat pocket. I'd brought it, even though I knew I wouldn't use it, and I opened it one last time. Funny thing about diamonds, they shine the brightest when you're sitting in the dark, completely alone. I didn't throw it in the lake. I didn't smash it. That would have felt too much like giving it power. Instead, I put it back in the drawer. Beside a folded paper, the hand-sketched flowchart I'd made for the proposal. Step by step, all that precision, all that hope, that was the first piece of me I let die. The next morning, I chopped firewood until my arms screamed. Not because I needed it. The heater worked fine. But the rhythm of swinging something hard against something unmovable felt honest. Later, I made a list in my journal. It started with, delete the reservation at the refinery. Cancel the Etsy order for Our First Christmas ornament. Return the china to the antique vendor in Cincinnati. Text Grace no. Write Grace a letter. A real one. But below that, the list changed. Rebuild the Camaro. No distractions this time. Take the job offer in Austin I've been sitting on. Do something selfish for once. That last line, I stared at it for a while. I wasn't even sure what selfish looked like for me. I'd spent most of my life being the guy people could count on, but maybe it was time I counted on myself. In early January, I started working overtime at the shop. My boss didn't ask questions. He just handed me a set of rusted suspension parts and said, "You sure?" There's something cathartic about rebuilding a car. You strip it down to the bolts. Examine every part, what works, what's worn out, what needs replacing. People should do that with their lives more often. On weeknights, I rebuilt the Camaro until midnight. Hands stained with grease, radio playing old Springsteen tracks. I wasn't just restoring a car. I was building something no one could take from me. And I didn't post any of it online. No cryptic quotes, no thirst trap, no curated pain. Silence was my weapon, and she would feel it. Steve reached out around mid-January, called me while I was under the Camaro. Ratchet in hand, I nearly didn't pick up. "Hey, son," he said, voice soft like he knew he had no right to call. I wanted to say I'm sorry." I didn't respond right away. He continued, "I didn't know she was going to bring Jensen. We didn't know until that morning." Grace cried the whole afternoon. That stopped me cold. She what? She was heartbroken. "Ethan, you're like a son to us. We didn't raise her to do that." The words hit me sideways, because part of me wanted to scream. Then why didn't you say something? But the other part, the one still holding a faint, fragile respect, just nodded into the phone. "I get it," I said. "Family's complicated. You're still welcome here," he said, "even if she isn't." That stuck with me, not because I planned to go back, but because it reminded me I wasn't crazy. I wasn't just a backup plan with a beard and a mortgage. I was a damn good man. And some people knew it. The twist came in March. I was just finishing a rebuild on the front axle, still wearing gloves, when I saw her car. Andrea. She pulled into my driveway like a ghost who didn't know she was dead. Hair tied up, hoodie too big, eyes swollen like she'd been crying in the car before knocking. She had something in her hands, a small box, gift wrapped in silver paper. I shouldn't have come, she said, almost whispering. No, you shouldn't have. I didn't know how else to say I'm sorry. Silence. I messed up, she added. I thought I wanted something exciting. I thought Jensen was the answer. And now I know he wasn't even the question. That line might have worked on someone else. Someone still hoping. Someone still holding on to the version of her that used to help sand quarter panels and drink gas station coffee with a smile. But not me. I leaned against the frame of the Camaro and just looked at her. I didn't yell. I didn't say I told you so. I simply asked, why now? She hesitated. Because you disappeared. And I couldn't stop thinking about you. How still you were. How safe. And how stupid I was to trade that for chaos. There it was. The truth. Wrapped in regret. I let her stand in that space. Let her feel the weight of my silence. Then I nodded once. Slow. Thanks for stopping by, I said. Take care. Andrea. I didn't take the gift. I didn't ask her to come inside. I turned, walked back into the garage, and let the door roll down behind me with a slow, final groan. She stood on the porch for a while after that. I watched through the slats, heart pounding. Throat tight, but I didn't move. Because some doors, once shut, don't need reopening. And some gifts are better left unopened. Andrea leaves, but she's not the only one watching Ethan now. Someone else saw what he built in the quiet. After Andrea left that day with the unopened gift in her hand and the weight of silence trailing behind her, something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger or sadness anymore. It was clarity. I realized that all my years of playing it safe, of being the steady one, had brought me nothing but heartbreak. I was tired of being the invisible man, the boring guy who got overlooked. So I made a decision. I wasn't just going to rebuild the Camaro. I was going to rebuild me, and not in the way that anyone expected. It started with the garage. I cleared out the space, scraping off old paint chips and dust that had settled like memories I didn't want. I set up a whiteboard and pinned up plans and notes like a general preparing for battle. One night, I caught myself staring at that folded proposal flowchart, the one I'd drawn months ago. Every step planned perfectly. Instead of crumpling it up, I pinned it right next to a photo of Andrea and me at that summer BBQ when everything still felt possible. Those two images, a plan for the future, and a frozen moment from the past reminded me what I was fighting for. Not for her, not for anyone else, for me. Next came the plan. I knew that just walking away wasn't enough. Andrea needed to understand what she lost, not through words, but through absence. So I started small. I stopped answering her texts, the ones that came hours or days later, filled with apologies and promises that I didn't want to hear. I deleted the photos we'd taken vacation, family dinners, silly selfies from my phone, not because I wanted to erase her from my life, but because I needed space to breathe. I changed my routine. No more casual lunches or weekend hangout. I became harder to read, and then I took a risk. I called my old boss in Austin and accepted the job offer I'd been too hesitant to take. It was a management role at a tech firm, with longer hours and more responsibility. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. A clean slate in a city buzzing with energy and opportunity. I didn't tell anyone, not Andrea, not her parent, not my friend. Just like the Camaro, I was stripping my life down to the essentials, ready to rebuild. But there was more. In the weeks that followed, I gathered evidence text messages where Andrea dismissed me, emails with vague excuses, photos she'd posted with Jensen. It wasn't about revenge in a petty sense. It was about truth. If I was going to move on, I needed to confront what had happened head on. And if Andrea or anyone else wanted to rewrite the story, I was ready to show them the facts. The twist came unexpectedly. One evening, as I was wrapping up at the shop, a package arrived. No return address. No note. Inside was a framed photo. A candid shot from that summer BBQ when Andrea and I first met. Smiling wide and carefree. On the back, a message. Remember who you really are. Don't let anyone dim your light. It was from Jake, my oldest friend, and the guy who introduced us. Jake wasn't just a friend. He was my anchor during the storm, sending quiet support when I felt like sinking. That photo, that message, was his way of saying, I see you. You're not alone. At the same time, whispers started. Andrea's family noticed the changes. The deleted photos, the sudden Austin job, the quiet absence. I wasn't the reliable guy anymore. I was the one who left without a sound. No confrontations, no drama, just a clean break. And that unsettled them, because they'd never seen this side of me before. They started calling, texting, asking if I wanted to talk things out. I refused. Silence was my boundary now. But the most dangerous move was yet to come. I reached out to a local car show organizer, the biggest one in Ohio. I submitted an application for my Camaro to be featured. Not just any feature, a restoration story, a comeback tale, the twist. The story wasn't just about a car, it was about me. The man who rebuilt himself piece by piece after being discarded. Andrea found out, not through me, but through the grapevine. I heard about her reaction through a mutual friend. Shock, regret, anger. She wanted to talk again, to explain, to fix things. But by then, I wasn't the guy waiting with open arms. I was the one driving forward alone, but stronger. This is where the story really thickens, because sometimes the quietest moves are the deadliest. And when you stop chasing approval and start chasing your dreams, the people who thought they owned your story realize they never really did. Andrea's next move is unexpected, and the people I thought were allies might not be who I thought. The first time I showed up at the Ohio Classic Car Expo, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might drown out the roaring engine. I pulled up in the Camaro, freshly polished, every detail gleaming under the winter sun. That car was more than a machine now. It was my army, my story, my silent scream. Walking into the expo hall, I felt eyes on me not just for the car, but for me. The guy who rebuilt himself, piece by piece, against all odds. The judges approached, clipboard in hand, nodding appreciatively at the restoration work. One of them, an older man with a faded leather jacket, tapped the hood and said, "That's craftsmanship. You've got heart." But the real risk wasn't the judges. It was the crowd. Andrea was there, not with Jensen, not smiling, but standing with her arms crossed. Watch it. Her expression wasn't just surprise, it was disbelief. Maybe even a touch of regret. I didn't look her way. Instead, I focused on the crowd gathering around the car. Whispers started. "That's Ethan Walker's Camaro. I heard he left Columbus. Did you know he's in Austin now?" The buzz grew. Someone snapped photo. Someone else asked for a business card. A local journalist came by, asking if I wanted to share my story for the community paper. I agreed. That day, the Camaro wasn't just a car, it was a symbol of quiet resilience, of showing up when everyone thought I'd disappear, of a man who refused to be forgotten. Andrea approached later, this time alone. Her voice was low, almost pleading. "Ethan, can we talk?" I shook my head. "I'm not the guy waiting anymore." She hesitated, then turned away. But the story wasn't over, because in the crowd, watching from a distance, was Steve, her father, and his eyes held a storm I'd never seen before. That night, I got a call. "Ethan," Steve said, voice rough with something I couldn't place. "We need to talk. This isn't over." I knew then that the game had changed. It wasn't just about me and Andrea anymore. It was about every unspoken word, every broken promise, every shadow of a family torn apart. And the next move, it would be mine. Steve's call isn't just a peace offering. It's a challenge that will shake everyone's foundation. Steve's voice on the phone was different than I expected, raw, shaky, like he'd swallowed a storm. "Ethan, it's time we talked." Face to face. I hadn't seen him since the Christmas fallout, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. But something in his tone, the weight behind it, pulled me out of my silence. We met at a small diner on the outskirts of Columbus, the kind with cracked vinyl booth, jukeboxes that never quite played the right song. and coffee thick enough to stand a spoon in. Steve showed up early, hands rough from years of firefighting and home repairs. Eyes tired but steady. He looked at me like he was trying to read a book he'd put down years ago. "I'm sorry," he said bluntly before I could speak. Not an excuse, just a truth. His wife, Grace, sat quietly beside him, hands folded, eyes bright but wary. "We failed you," Steve continued. "We didn't see what was happening. Andrea, she wasn't ready for the kind of commitment you offered. And we didn't protect you from that." I felt something raw crack open inside. This wasn't just an apology. It was a reckoning. For months, I'd held on to the bitterness, the rejection, the silent replacement. But hearing their honesty shifted something. Maybe the family I thought I was joining had its own fractures. Maybe I wasn't the only one carrying scars. I leaned forward, voice low but firm. "What do you want from me?" Steve's jaw tightened. "We want to fix this, for all our sakes. But that means you have to be willing to stand up, not just for Andrea, but for yourself," Grace added. "We want to show Andrea what she lost. But she has to see it through your actions, not just word." That night, as I drove home, their words echoed in my head. Actions, not words. It was the same lesson I'd been trying to live. The next morning, I stood in my garage, hands on the steering wheel of the Camaro, feeling every scar and scratch as a badge of survival. I knew what I had to do. I started by reaching out to the local news offering my story. The restoration wasn't just about a car. It was about second chances, about resilience. The story ran in the Columbus Dispatch, spotlighting my journey. The response was overwhelming. People reached out, strangers, friends, even some family members I hadn't heard from in years. And then came the unexpected twist. Andrea called. Her voice was shaky, full of regret and fear. "Ethan, I saw the article. I didn't realize what I lost. Can we talk?" I didn't answer. Instead, I sent a text. Talk is for people who listen. I'm moving forward. That text wasn't just a rejection. It was a declaration. I wasn't the same man who waited silently for love to find him. I was someone who took control. And that control was only just beginning. Andrea's last move could change everything, or destroy what little is left. I didn't expect closure to feel so empty. That morning, I stood outside my garage, the Camaro gleaming softly in the early light. The car was more than metal and paint. It was every late night, every scraped knuckle, every ounce of patience I poured into rebuilding myself. I ran my hand along the hood, feeling the smooth curves and the small imperfections that told my story. It was time to let go. Andrea's final message came hours later. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I see now what I lost. I hope you find the happiness I couldn't give you. No, please, or can we try again?" Just those words, distant and deliberate. I read it 3 times, each time feeling a strange mix of relief and regret. Not for her, not for the past, but for what could have been. I stood in the kitchen, the worn wood floor creaking beneath my feet, and thought about the years I spent believing that being the good guy was enough. But life isn't a checklist of stability and responsibility. It's messy. It's unpredictable. It demands courage to step out of the shadows and claim your worth. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the bitter warmth grounding me. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice, the kind that comes from honoring yourself, setting boundaries, and walking away when love becomes something less than respect. And in that moment, I understood that my story wasn't just about heartbreak. It was about resilience, about building something lasting, not just a car, but a life where I'm seen and valued. Months later, I launched a small foundation for young men and women trying to rebuild after broken relationships. We hosted workshops on self-worth, healing, and finding strength in vulnerability. Every time I spoke, I remembered that winter night alone in the cabin, the ring tucked away, the silence that taught me to listen to myself. Steve and Grace showed up to the first event, smiling with pride and unspoken forgiveness. Andrea never came, and that was okay, because I was no longer waiting for anyone to complete me. I was whole. The Camaro roared down the highway one sunny afternoon, wind whipping through the open windows. And for the first time, it wasn't about where I was going. It was about knowing I had the power to drive there. What I learned, being the good guy doesn't guarantee love. Sometimes, it means standing alone long enough to become the person you were meant to be. Trust your gut, hold your ground, and never settle for less than respect, because the greatest revenge is living well on your own terms. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt invisible, betrayed, or underestimated, leave a comment below. Let's remind each other we're not alone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your story matters just like mine. Story 2. I'm Mackenzie Walker. I'm 28 years old, and this past Christmas Eve, I stood on the front steps of my aunt's picture-perfect house, holding a homemade bourbon pecan pie and a bag of hand-wrapped gifts, only to hear the words I never thought I'd hear from my own blood. We don't want you here. Go ruin someone else's holiday. Through the open doorway, I saw my entire family, my mother, my brother, my sister laughing around the dining table under a crystal chandelier, glasses of wine clinking, candles flickering. No one turned to look at me. No one said a word. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I just nodded, turned around, and walked back into the cold. And 10 minutes later, headlights cut through the snowy street. My father jumped out of the car without closing the door behind him and ran. Actually ran toward me, like I was something worth chasing. But let me rewind, because this story didn't start on Christmas Eve. It started years ago, with cracks, with silence, with the kind of quiet betrayals that don't make noise until they collapse your world. I was born and raised in Tacoma, Washington blue-collar town with enough rain to wash things clean, but not enough to drown the history. My parents divorced when I was 23. The split wasn't sudden. It was the result of years of small, invisible wounds. My dad, David, is the kind of man who doesn't raise his voice unless there's a fire. A civil engineer who values integrity over impressions. After the divorce, he moved into a modest downtown apartment, exposed brick, second-hand furniture, the kind of place that smells like coffee and sawdust every Sunday. He made French toast and let me pick the music. My mom, Karen, stayed in the family home. She has a talent for hosting flawless table setting, seasonal wreaths, and that social grace that's both impressive and exhausting. She also has a talent for subtle judgment, always coated in sugar. You'd never know she was disappointed in you unless you looked closely at her smile. My younger sister, Amber, was 16 when they split. She clung to our mom and Aunt Laura like driftwood. She's creative, quiet, talented, always sketching something. But after the divorce, she stopped drawing in front of me. My older brother, Connor, is the golden child, business major, clean haircut, owns a BMW and a closet full of quarter-zip ambition. He became my mother's unofficial spokesperson after the split, and he never looked back. Then there's Aunt Laura, my mom's younger sister and her unofficial advisor. She's the kind of woman who calls herself traditional, but means controlling. Vice president at a bank, pearl earrings always in place, and a smile that can slice through concrete. Growing up, I was the bridge, the one who brought both sides together, who offered to host neutral dinners, who remembered birthdays and carried extra umbrellas. After the divorce, I stopped being the bridge. I became the distance. The years that followed were a master class in emotional exclusion. I wasn't disowned. I was just left out. Holidays became negotiations. Invitations came late, if at all. Aunt Laura often acted as the family gatekeeper. Your mom doesn't think it's appropriate for your dad's new girlfriend to be at Thanksgiving. Or, we already made plans that include Connor's girlfriend's family, so there's really no room this year. Still, I tried. I sent Amber tickets to art exhibits I thought she'd love. I called Mom for coffee, always met with vague rain checks. I even congratulated Connor on his promotion to regional manager with a thoughtful email and zero sarcasm. They never said, "You're not part of the family." But somehow, they never said I was either. Then, 4 months ago, something shifted. I landed a job at Evergreen Design, an architecture firm that specialized in sustainable housing. It was my dream. Long hours. Yes. Stress. Off the chart. But I was finally designing something that mattered. My dad was over the moon. My mom, polite. That's nice. Dear, did you hear Connor's being considered for executive track? I tried not to take it personally. And then came the call. Early December, 7:42. Miss. I was sketching elevation lines for a low-income housing project. My phone lit up. Mom, call it. We think it's time to put the past behind us. She said, Laura's making her famous prime rib. Everyone will be there. I blinked. Everyone? I asked. Hesitant. Hopeful. Well, not your father. Obviously, she replied. Her tone clipped. But Connor would be there. Amber too. She was excited to show you her college portfolio. Mom said, as if nothing had ever gone wrong. I should have known better. But hope is a stubborn thing. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing gifts. Not store-bought, but intentional. For Mom. A restored photo of her and Grandma in the 1980s. I found it in one of Dad's old boxes and had it professionally restored. Framed in walnut. For Connor. Vintage blueprints of the Smith Tower, his favorite as a kid. Before spreadsheets replaced Skyline. For Amber. A portfolio of my own college projects, with handwritten notes on professors. Tips on how to find inspiration on bad days. Even for Aunt Laura. A custom-engraved silver pen that read, To New Beginnings, M. And the pie. Bourbon pecan. My dad's specialty. I still remember him teaching me how to make it during our first Christmas after the divorce. Let the sugar brown before the bourbon hits. He'd said, timing's everything. I wore a forest green sweater dress, curled my hair, and put on Grandma Thompson's gold necklace, a graduation gift I rarely wore. That night, it felt right. I left early to beat the snow, triple-checked the gift bag, and told myself, they invited you. This is a good sign. This year, it will be different. But it wasn't. And the moment that door opened, everything I had pushed down for years rose like bile in my throat. Aunt Laura stood there, eyes scanning me with a precision that felt surgical. We don't want you here. Go ruin someone else's holiday. Behind her, the house glowed like a Christmas movie fireplace. Laughter, polished wood floor, and curated happiness. No one looked up. No one intervened. I didn't speak. I didn't beg. I just slowly placed the pie on the front step, set the gift bag beside him, reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the handwritten card I'd brought just in case. I came with kindness. You chose rejection. This Christmas. I'm choosing a different kind of family. I tucked it into the bag, turned around, and walked into the snow. No tears, no drama, just the sound of my boots crunching through fresh powder, and the voice in my head saying, you try it, that's enough. Then headlights, my father's car, door still open, engine running. He ran toward me like I was the last good thing in the world. But what he said when he reached me, that changed everything. Because apparently, this had been planned from the start. He didn't say anything right away. My father just pulled me into the kind of hug that anchors you to the ground. Tight, steady, no words, just warmth, breath, and snow melting in our hair. For a long time, we stood there like two people who'd finally stopped pretending the world was fair. Then he stepped back and looked me square in the eye. You needed to see it for yourself, he said. Now you know. I blinked, confused. My cheeks were burning from the cold, my heart still throbbing from Laura's voice in my head. We don't want you here. Go ruin someone else's holiday. Know what? I asked. He exhaled, rubbed a hand over his beard. That they were never going to let you in. Not really. This wasn't about forgiveness. It was a setup. You mean they invited me just to let you get your hopes up, so they could crush them on their own terms? We drove home in silence, headlights slicing through falling snow. Inside the car, the heater hummed low, the kind of sound that fills in spaces where words fail. I stared out the window, the warmth of his jacket slowly thawing the chill in my bones. The pie was gone. The gifts. I didn't know if they took them in or threw them out. But I knew one thing now, something I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a choice. They chose not to let me in. When we got to his apartment, everything smelled like cinnamon and lemon oil. My dad's Christmas tree was up modest, a little lopsided, decorated with ornaments I made in third grade. A tiny knitted stocking with my name, stitched crookedly, still hung by the heater. He poured me a mug of cocoa and added a splash of bourbon without asking. I sat on the couch, hands wrapped around the warmth, my eyes on the soft glow of the light. "Why didn't you warn me?" I finally asked. "Because you wouldn't have believed me," he said. "And because I knew if they hurt you again, you wouldn't go back." He was right. I always made excuses for them. Mom's just stressed. Laura means well. Connor doesn't know the full story. But tonight, there was no gray area. No room left for giving them the benefit of the doubt. The next morning, I woke up to find a tiny wrapped box on the kitchen counter with a sticky note for surviving. Love. Doubt. Inside was a keychain. Metal. Simple. Shaped like a tiny home blueprint. Engraved underneath. Home is who stay. I nearly cried. But instead, I made eggs and coffee, sat across from him at the tiny kitchen table, and finally felt oddly at peace. Over the next few days, I didn't hear from Mom, or Connor, or Amber. Not a text, not a call, nothing. But I did hear from someone else. Friday morning, my inbox pinged with a message from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "She didn't want me to tell you this." I opened it cautiously, pulse quickening. It was from a girl named Natalie, Amber's best friend from high school. We'd met once at an art show years ago. The email was short. "Hey, Mackenzie, I know we don't really know each other, but I saw your Christmas post." Amber showed it to me. She cried. A lot. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but she wanted you there. She begged your mom to invite you. It was Aunt Laura who made the final call. I just thought you should know you weren't the only one trying. My chest ached. I closed the laptop and stared out the window. Snow still drifted, lighter now. Amber wanted me there. She just couldn't go against Laura. A part of me softened. Another part hardened. This wasn't just a betrayal from one person. It was a system, a hierarchy, and Laura sat at the top. I started noticing things after that. A photo from Christmas popped up on Mom's Facebook. Everyone smiling around the dinner table. Connor's fiancée, tagging it, family goals. But someone was missing. Amber. She wasn't in a single photo. Not one. I messaged her. Simple. No expectation. "Hey, hope you're okay. I heard you fought for me. Thank you." Seen. No reply. But an hour later, my post from Christmas, the one with the pie, and caption, "Some families choose love," got a new like. Amber. That same night, my dad and I sat down to rewatch It's a Wonderful Life. We'd watched it every year since I was 12, but this year, it hit differently. There's a line near the end where Clarence the Angel says, "Strange, isn't it? Each man's life touches so many other lives. When he isn't around, he leaves an awful hole, doesn't he?" I thought about that hole. The one my family kept pretending I didn't leave behind. The one I knew Amber felt. I wasn't invisible. They just wanted me to believe I was. At the end of the movie, as George Bailey stood surrounded by people who showed up when he needed them most, I looked over at my dad. He wasn't dramatic, wasn't flowery with words, but in that moment, he turned to me and said, "You don't have to earn love, kid. Not in a real family. You just have to show up and be yourself. And if they don't want you after that, they were never yours to begin with." I didn't cry. I just smiled, nodded, and felt something inside me loosen. Not everything that breaks needs to be fixed. Some things need to be walked away from. But as I closed my eyes that night, I couldn't help but wonder. If Amber did want me there, then why did she stay silent when I was pushed out? And what would happen if she was the next one they turned on? The silence from Amber lingered like fog. She had seen my message, liked the post, but said nothing. Still, that tiny blue scene felt like a door creaking open, not wide, but just enough to make me hesitate before walking away entirely. It wasn't long before I learned why she hadn't replied. The first real crack came from another message. This one from my dad. Mid-morning on a Tuesday. Did you know Amber's applying for a scholarship at PNCA? She submitted her portfolio last month. Laura told your mom it's a waste of time. I stared at the screen, my stomach dropping. PNCA, the Pacific Northwest College of Art, was my dream school once. I had been accepted, even started the first semester, before I had to transfer out to be closer to Dad after the divorce. Amber had always admired my work, even asked to look through my sketchbooks when we were younger, but no one ever mentioned she was applying to art school, especially not our mother. That explained the portfolio gift I'd prepared for her, and why Laura wouldn't want me near her. Art meant independence, and independence meant Laura would lose control. Out of instinct, I opened Amber's Instagram. Her feed was careful filtered brunch photos, study desk setup, a few snapshots of her cat, but hidden among the aesthetics, buried beneath a photo of a coffee mug, was a slide deck of 6 abstract pieces, vivid, textured, bursting with emotion. And one of them was titled Thanksgiving Table, 2021. 21. A long, polished dining table, 4 full chairs, 1 chair in the foreground, empty, pushed slightly back, a broken fork on the plate. My chest tightened. It was me. She had painted me missing. I wanted to reach out again, but something stopped me. Maybe fear, maybe caution. So instead, I took a different route. That weekend, I stopped by a local art gallery downtown, small, independent, the kind that showcased emerging artists. I knew the curator, Dinah. From my early days at Evergreen Design, she was warm, open-minded, a believer in giving quiet talent a megaphone. I showed her Amber's piece. She leaned in, eyes soft but focused. This is bold, raw. Whoever painted this has something to say and doesn't care if it makes people uncomfortable. I told her who Amber was, that she hadn't applied here yet, that she was being strongly encouraged to take up business instead. Dana laughed, short and bitter. Let me guess. Rich aunt, control issues, lots of passive-aggressive birthday cards. I smiled. You have no idea. She leaned back, arms crossed. If she's willing to submit, I can get her in front of a few jurors. No promises, but she's good, really good. I thanked her, heart thudding. It wasn't my fight, but maybe I could build her a bridge. That night, I sent Amber one last message. Short, honest. Saw your piece. Thanksgiving table. It wrecked me in a good way. A gallery downtown is interested if you want to show your work. No pressure. Just thought you should know that someone sees you. What? Hours passed. No reply. Then at 1:17 a.m. Just when I'd given up, my phone buzzed. I didn't know you saw that. I'm sorry. I didn't say anything on Christmas. I didn't know how to stand up to her. Another message followed. They said you were unstable, that you'd make a scene. But when you left that pie and didn't yell, I realized they were wrong. I stared at her words. There was nothing performative about them, just guilt and courage and truth. I want to apply to Peak, but Laura found the form. She shredded it, said I'd embarrass the family if I went through with it. And finally, if I disappear from social, it's because she took my phone. I sat there in the dark, phone glowing in my palm, something twisting in my gut. Laura had always been controlling, but this wasn't just control. It was isolation. It was manipulation. It was abuse. The next morning, Amber's profile vanished. Instagram, gone. Facebook, deactivated. Her VSCO, where she used to post her early pieces, blank. I messaged her. Nothing. I called. Straight to voicemail. I even emailed. Bounce. It was like she'd been erased. I drove to my mother's neighborhood, parked outside their house across the street, and watched from my car. The curtains were drawn. Christmas lights still up, even in mid-January. Their lives looked normal, calm, except I knew better. At 4:13 p.m., I saw Amber step outside to take out the trash. No phone, no bag, no earbud, just her. Pale, shoulders tight, moving like she didn't want to be seen. Then I saw Laura step onto the porch. Watching her like a hawk, Amber dropped the trash bag, wiped her hands on her jeans, and turned to go back in. But just before stepping inside, she paused, looked out across the street. Her eyes met mine. Just for a second. She didn't wave, didn't smile, but she saw me. And I saw her. She mouthed 2 words before the door closed behind her. Help me. I didn't sleep that night. Laura had always ruled with control. Not violence, but this felt like something different. Something that went deeper than just keeping up appearances. Amber wasn't just being guilt-tripped. She was being silenced. And the worst part, no one else was going to stop it. That's when I realized, if I wanted to save her, I'd have to outmaneuver Laura on her own turf. A turf built on image, on legacy, on fear. It wasn't about gifts or letters anymore. This was war, and I was done playing nice. I didn't know what Amber meant when she mouthed, "Help me." But I felt it like an anchor dropped in my chest. This wasn't just about being shut out anymore. It was about saving someone still inside. So I did what I always do when I feel powerless. I made a plan. First step. Expose the cracks in Laura's perfect porcelain. See? Aunt Laura doesn't scream. She curates. She makes cruelty look like concern. And she thrives in silence, where no one asks hard questions. So I'd ask them out loud, in public, and in ways she couldn't control. I started with the pie. The same bourbon pecan pie I left on Laura's doorstep that night, still warm, untouched. I baked another one. Not because I'm sentimental, but because symbols matter. It was my way of saying, you don't get to throw me out of the story. I plated it beautifully, photographed it in natural light, and posted it online with a caption. Baked the pie again. This time, I shared it with someone who actually wanted me there. Family is more than blood. It's who opens the door. I didn't tag anyone. Didn't need to. But it took less than an hour for the vultures to smell smoke. I got a call from Connor that evening. What exactly are you trying to do? Mackenzie. His voice was clipped, like I'd violated some unspoken contract. Just living my life, I said, sharing pie. You're embarrassing, Mom. Aunt Laura says your little posts are stirring things up. Good, I said. They should be stirred. You're making it sound like we abandoned you. I let that hang. Didn't you? Silence. Then he hung up. The next move was quiet. Riskier. I reached out to Dana, the gallery curator. If I sent you Amber's other work, can you showcase it anonymously? She didn't hesitate. Yeah, I'll put it in the February show. Title it The Uninvited. The symbolism made me shiver. I uploaded 4 of Amber's unreleased pieces, the ones I'd screenshotted before her accounts vanished. Each one had that same emotional charge. Anger, longing, defiant. This was no longer just a sister's portfolio. This was a voice fighting to breathe. But then, I got an email from Laura. Subject: let's talk. I sat in front of my screen for 5 full minutes before opening it. Mackenzie, I'm sure you think you're helping, but what you're doing is dangerous. Amber is a minor, and she's under my guardianship for a reason. Her mental state has been fragile since the divorce. If you care about her at all, you'll stop feeding her delusions. I read the word delusions 3 times. Amber's art was not a delusion. Her desire for independence wasn't dangerous. But Laura had always had a way of framing control as protection. And this email, it was a warning. I showed it to my dad that night. He didn't say much, just folded his arms and stared out the window. She's laying the groundwork, he finally said. If anything blows up, she'll say it was to protect Amber, not to punish her. What if we go legal? I asked. Can we do anything? Not unless Amber speaks up. And even then, Laura's got a web of concerned adults ready to back her narrative. Your mom, Connor, maybe even Amber's school counselor, if she's gotten to them. I clenched my fists. So what? We wait until she breaks. Dad looked at me then. Really looked. No. We wait until she asks. And when she does, we catch her. But I couldn't just sit still. So I set the next piece in motion. I scheduled a public Q&A at the gallery and artist talk, meant to highlight emerging anonymous talents. I titled it Invisible Daughter. We marketed it as a conversation about women, artists whose voices had been buried by family expectations. A theme so pointed it might as well have been a dart. I invited journalists. I invited community leaders. I even invited a few local college reps who had connections to PNCA. And then I sent one final email to Amber. If you ever wanted to tell your story, this is the time. No one has to know it's you, but your work is already speaking. Let it scream. The day of the event. I arrived early. Dana had hung Amber's work in a corner bathed in soft light, right next to a piece titled Exit Wound by a survivor of parental alienation. I didn't know if Amber would come, but I'd saved a seat in the back row just in case. As the crowd gathered, I took a breath, stepped onto the small platform, and opened with this. Most people think being disowned looks dramatic. A slammed door, a shouted curse. But sometimes, it looks like a quiet dinner where no one sets a place for you. Sometimes, the betrayal is so polite, you don't realize it happened until years later when you're still standing outside in the snow, holding a pie no one wanted. There was silence, then a murmur, then applause. Halfway through the night, I felt a shift in the air, a creak, a presence. I turned toward the back row. Amber, wearing a gray hoodie, hands shoved in the sleeve, eyes glassy, but steady. She hadn't touched the refreshments. She hadn't spoken to anyone. But she was there. And just before the lights dimmed again for the next speaker, she slipped a folded note under my chair. Later that night, in the quiet of my apartment, I opened it. 6 words, written in the same tiny, cramped handwriting she used when we were kids. I'm ready. What's the plan? Amber's note, just 6 words, felt like a secret knock at a hidden door. I'm ready. What's the plan? No tear. No dramatic. Just quiet resolve. I read it 3 times in my dim apartment, heart hammering like it was waiting for permission. And finally, for the first time in years, I felt like we were back on the same team. Step 1. Protect her. Amber was still a legal dependent, barely 18, and Laura had eyes everywhere: school administrator, neighbors, family friends who thought she walked on water. We couldn't pull anything reckless. If Amber disappeared too suddenly, Laura would spin it into a mental health episode or worse, stage an intervention. Drag her back. So we played it smart, strategic. Amber and I started using encrypted messaging app. No email, no Instagram. We talked in code art references, color names, obscure quotes from childhood cartoons only we would recognize. Dad was in on it too. He bought her a burner phone with cash and delivered it to her in an old sketchbook during one of her mandatory bonding weekends with him. Amber named it Frankie, like Frankenstein's monster, built from pieces, alive in secret. Step 2. Give her leverage. We needed something that could make Laura afraid. Not angry, she could handle anger, but scared. Scared was new territory. That's when Amber gave me a gift I wasn't expecting. Laura's been hiding stuff. She messaged one night, like big stuff. I pressed for more, and she slowly opened up. Apparently, Laura had used family trust funds originally set aside for college expenses to secure a personal business loan years ago. She'd always planned to pay it back quietly, but when the bank's merger fell through last year, she panicked. Instead of coming clean, she forged a fake investment statement and gave it to my mom and Connor, pretending the money was still growing. She told them the trust is just under a different management firm. But the firm doesn't exist. I Googled it. It's a shell. It took me 3 minutes to confirm it. Amber had screenshot, photocopied, even a flash drive she'd secretly copied from Laura's home office. Just like that, we had ammunition. Step 3. Use her vanity. Laura's greatest strength was her obsession with public image. So we flipped it. I contacted a local parenting podcast Northwest Legacy Moms, a glossy, smug little program Laura adored. She'd been featured on it once for raising accomplished children with strong values. Her episode was still pinned on her Facebook. I told them I had a lead for a potential story. A quiet whistleblower, a young artist being silenced by a powerful maternal figure in an affluent family who wanted to anonymously share her journey. They ate it up. The generational trauma angle, the control dynamic, the art as resistance angle. We're in, the producer said. Can we speak to the artist? Amber agreed on one condition. Her voice would be altered, name withheld. The host agreed. We recorded in Dad's apartment, with blackout curtains drawn and a fake name, Ellie. She told them about feeling erased, about how her work was discarded or dismissed, how any time she questioned the future they planned for her, she was met with, "You're lucky to be part of this family. Don't ruin it." And then, at the very end, Amber dropped the bomb. Someone used my future as collateral. I was never the priority, just part of the image. The episode went live 3 days later. It went viral in 24 hours. Laura didn't know it was her. Not at first. She posted a vague Facebook rant about entitled girls with TikTok microphones spreading lies and how some children mistake rebellion for bravery. But then, Connor called me. "Mom says you're behind that podcast thing. Says you're filling Amber's head with nonsense." I didn't deny it. "Connor," I said carefully, "how confident are you in the state of your trust fund right now?" A beat. Then, "What the hell does that mean?" I let the silence do the heavy lifting. Then added, "Check the investment firm. The one Laura says is managing it. Start there." He hung up. By the following week, the cracks were no longer cracks. They were chasms. Amber told me Connor confronted Laura about the money. She denied him, of course. Accused me of planting false documents. But Connor wasn't a fool. He dug, and once he couldn't verify the firm existed, he pulled back hard. He told Mom everything. Mom, in turn, panicked, and suddenly, the family group chat I hadn't seen in 3 years lit up with messages about loyalty and embarrassment and how Mackenzie is turning everyone against us. I watched the implosion from a distance. No need to say a word. Amber's phone lit up one morning with a single text from Laura. "I want the flash drive back. You're not ready to be on your own." No apology. No denial. Just control. Amber didn't reply. She blocked the number. And then, it happened. A knock on the door of Dad's apartment. I froze. So did he. But when he opened it, it wasn't Laura. It was Mom. Hair pulled back tight, coat still on, holding a folder in one hand, and her silence in the other. "I need to talk to both of you," she said. "It's about Amber." My stomach dropped. We sat across from each other in the living room. The pie plate from last week still sat empty on the counter. She didn't yell, didn't even cry. "I didn't know," she whispered. "About the money, about the school, about what Laura did." She looked straight at me, her voice breaking just slightly. I believed her. Because she always seemed so composed. Because she said you were dramatic, that you twisted things. And you never asked me. I said, "Quiet. Firm." She nodded. I didn't. She placed the folder on the table. Inside, copies of Amber's PNCA application, signed by her, with a letter of recommendation from Mom herself. "I can't fix what I let happen," she said, "but I can stop pretending it didn't." Amber stood in the hallway, just out of sight, listening, when she finally stepped forward. She didn't hug Mom, didn't cry. She just picked up the folder, looked through it, and said, "I'll go, but not with you." Mom didn't argue. She just nodded, eyes wet, and walked out. As the door clicked shut, Amber turned to me. "So, what now?" I smiled. "Now, we make sure Laura never touches you again, because we still had the flash drive. We still had the gallery shut, and we still had one final card to play." Amber never liked the spotlight. Even as a kid, she'd hide behind her sketch pad while adults praised her maturity. She didn't want applause, just permission to exist without being edited. So when I suggested making the final move public, I expected hesitation. Instead, she just said, "Then let's burn it down, quiet." We weren't doing this for revenge. Not anymore. We were doing it for freedom. But sometimes, those things look the same. The first domino fell on a Thursday morning. Amber uploaded a digital art zine called Inheritance. 6 pages. Raw. Unfiltered. No names, but if you'd lived inside our family, you didn't need them. Page 1. A little girl watching a perfectly set table from the hallway. Everyone's laughing. Her chair is missing. Page 4. An older woman in pearls, smiling wide while duct taping a girl's mouth shut with words like obedience and gratitude scribbled on the tape. Page 6. A girl standing on a dining table, setting it on fire. No caption. Just one word, painted underneath in blood red. Enough. She posted it anonymously, under a handle only a few of us knew. But it caught fire anyway. Because pain when it's honest echoed. The second move was bolder. We emailed the local PTA board, attached a copy of the altered trust documents Laura had forged, alongside a time-stamped version from the actual bank. We didn't accuse, just asked, "Is this the kind of stewardship we want associated with our children's leadership?" No signature, no explanation. We let the documents speak for themselves. Then we waited. By Friday evening, Laura's world had started to tilt. I heard it from Connor first. He called in a panic. "She's freaking out. The bank's opening an internal review. Mom's got all her accounts frozen until they verify what's real." "And what do you think?" I asked. "I think I don't know her anymore," he whispered. "Maybe." I said, "You finally do." He didn't reply, but he didn't hang up either. The gallery added fuel to the fire. Dana, always tactful, always 2 steps ahead, printed Amber's zine and mounted the final image on canvas for the Invisible Daughters closing night. The headline on the flyer, "What we leave behind isn't always inheritance." Amber didn't show. She didn't need to. Her art was there. Her voice was there. And slowly, the silence around her began to collapse. Then came the twist none of us expected. An anonymous post surfaced in a local parenting forum. It claimed that Laura had been mismanaging funds, not just for our family, but for several others she'd advised through her church's financial wellness group. Apparently, she'd offered to optimize a few college savings plans, quietly pulling from them to finance home renovations, investment, and even private school tuition for her own children. They trusted her. She robbed them. Amber and I weren't the only ones holding matches. Turns out, we'd been standing in a room already soaked in gasoline. Saturday morning, Laura made a statement on Facebook, all gray text on white background. No profile picture. She blamed a smear campaign, claimed her decades of service were being twisted by bitter family members and internet trolls with a vendetta. But the comments didn't go how she planned. Parents posted screenshots, old email, bank record, even screenshots of text messages where she'd shamed one mother for splurging on community college instead of planning for Harvard. Her mask had cracked, and beneath it was someone the town didn't want to defend. Amber stayed quiet through all of it, but she watched. I knew because she sent me a single text Sunday night. She hasn't looked at me since. But I can breathe in the house again. I didn't know what that felt like. Then another. 5 minutes later, "Is this what being free feels like?" I didn't reply right away. I just let it sit. Let her have the air. But of course, Laura couldn't go quietly. Monday morning, Amber was served papers. Guardianship extension. She was barely a legal adult, and Laura filed for emergency conservatorship, claiming Amber was being manipulated, mentally unwell, and at risk of harming her future. A desperate move, but under California law, plausible and dangerous. Amber called me in tears. She's trying to own me again. She's saying I'm unstable. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. "We're not going back," I said. "You hear me? Not one step." I called Dana, called the podcast team, called Mom, who had finally picked a side. Then I made the hardest call, to our old family attorney. The same man who'd once represented Laura in her divorce. I have a client, I told him. She needs a protection order, and fast. Who's the petition? Amber. And the respondent? Her aunt. Silence. Then a long, slow sigh. Send me everything. Tuesday morning, we filed our counter motion. Amber signed every form with a shaking hand. She didn't cry. She didn't flint. And at the bottom of her affidavit, under reason for seeking protective intervention, she wrote, because I deserve a life I don't have to escape from. By Thursday, the judge granted a temporary freeze on Laura's filing. It wasn't over, but it was enough. Enough to keep Amber in school, enough to keep her free, enough to let her finish her PNCA portfolio and mail it, trembling fingers and all. The final piece came that weekend. At the gallery's closing event, Dana unveiled a surprise installation, a full-room exhibit featuring pieces from Inheritance, framed beside childhood drawings Amber had hidden in her old sketchbooks. In the center was the now iconic image of the girl on fire at the table. Next to it, a real wooden dining chair, empty, ash gray, charred at the legs. A placard beneath it read, "Set the table for who you are, or someone else will remove your seat." No one spoke. They just stared, and as I turned to leave, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Amber. No hoodie, no slouch. Just her. She smiled. I mailed my portfolio last night. How'd it feel? I asked, like I finally opened the door to my own house. I hugged her. And what if Laura tries again? She looked me dead in the eye. Then I burned the whole fucking dining room. 3 weeks after the final gallery night, the envelope arrived. Amber didn't text me. She just showed up at my apartment with it in her hand. Still sealed. Her fingers were trembling. But her eyes, steady. She set it on my kitchen table, the same one we'd eaten fast food on the night Laura kicked me out. Same wood grain. Same tiny burn mark near the edge from a forgotten candle. She slid it toward me. You open it. I shook my head. This is your chair now, Amber. You open your own doors. She exhaled. Then, slowly, with the precision of someone defusing a bomb, she broke the seal. The letter inside had a header from PNCA. Crisp and clean, and one word, bold and unmistakable. Congratulations. She didn't cry. She laughed a short, sharp breath that sounded like freedom. Then she looked at me. She'll see it. Let her, I said. She'll spin it. Let her choke on it. Amber folded the letter gently and tucked it back in the envelope. Then she said something I didn't expect. Can we still make pie tonight? We baked. We talked. And somewhere between the bourbon and the pecans, I asked her something I'd never dared to before. Do you think she ever loved us? Amber was quiet for a while. She spooned filling into the crust like it was holy work. Then she said, I think she loved the idea of us. The version that stayed quiet, that smiled on cue. Do you think she believes she's the victim now? She nodded. That's what makes it so dangerous. She doesn't know she's the villain. Laura didn't face jail time. Let's be clear. People like her rarely do. There were fines, frozen accounts, investigations that never made the evening news. The school board quietly revoked her PTA seat. The podcast scrubbed her episode. Dana got a cease and desist letter that she framed and hung in the bathroom. But Laura, she pivoted, started posting healing journey content, talked about family betrayal and rebuilding after loss. She wore linen, quoted Brené Brown, called it deconstruction. But here's the thing about reinvention. It doesn't erase the people you stepped on. And it definitely doesn't stop the ones you erased from learning how to speak louder. Amber moved out 2 weeks later. Not to a dorm. Not to a shared apartment. She found a tiny studio above a second-hand bookstore downtown. Sunlight leaking in from tall windows. Paint chipped just enough to feel like her own. She hung Inheritance on the wall. Not as a trophy, but as a warning. I helped her move. At the end of the day, we sat on the floor with takeout containers and no chair, and she said, I don't want to rebuild what she tried to give me. I want to build something she could never imagine. Connor eventually reached out again, not to apologize, not fully, but to ask why we didn't tell him sooner. Why we didn't trust him. I sent back one sentence, because when someone chooses silence every time they have the chance to speak, that's not neutrality, that's consent. He didn't reply. But weeks later, he donated to Amber's tuition fund anonymously. She knew it was him. She didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. Some bridges don't burn. They just become unnecessary. Mom changed. 2. Not overnight. Not in any performative, social media-worthy way. But she started showing up. Invited Amber over for Sunday dinner. No strings. Offered help. Then backed off when it wasn't accepted. One night, she asked me, "Do you think I failed?" I told her the truth. "You believed the loudest voice in the room, but you showed up when it mattered. That doesn't erase the hurt, but it means something." She nodded. "I just hope I'm not too late." I squeezed her hand. "You're not the first person to mistake perfection for love. But now you know better." The last piece of this story. It happened 6 months later. PNCA hosted a showcase for incoming students. Each was asked to present one piece that defined their voice. Amber stood on stage, heart thundering in her chest, and unveiled her latest work. Not a painting, a sculpture, a dining table, charred, splintered, built from the remains of old furniture she'd found in neighborhood dumps. 6 chairs surrounded it. 5 were perfect sanded smooth, painted gold. The 6th, shattered, glued together with deliberate cracks showing. It had her name carved on the back. When someone asked her why it looked broken, she smiled. "Because it is, and it still belongs here." Let me leave you with this. We talk a lot about blood and loyalty, about family as destiny. But sometimes, the most sacred thing you can do is choose who gets a seat at your table. Amber wasn't trying to destroy a family. She was trying to build one that didn't require her to disappear. And that's not rebellion. That's survival. So, if you're still listening, I'll say this. If someone erases you while smiling, don't wait to be invited back. Build your own damn table. Set one chair. Name it after yourself. And never, ever apologize for being too loud in a room that only valued your silence. Hey, if this story hit home for you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'd love to hear about your own Amber moment that day you finally stood up from a table that didn't see you. You never know who you might help by telling it. Until next time.